Well, it's been overshadowed by news about war heroes and retired tailbacks, but the president has been in the news today, too, as he often is. Last night, he went after his own attorney general, Jeff Sessions, saying he was angry that Sessions had recused himself from the Russia investigation. If he had to do it over again, the president said, he would have hired someone else to be the AG. Stinging words, but this morning, Sessions seemed to brush them off.
Given what he said, what is your reaction to those remarks, and how seriously are you considering possibly resigning?
We love this job, we love this department, and I plan to continue to do so as long as that is appropriate.
How do you feel like you can effectively serve from here on out if you don't have the confidence of the president?
We're serving right now. I'm totally confident that we can continue to run this office in an effective way.
Now, take a step back, and you can kind of see how this all happened. The president is a 71-year-old political novice, and all of a sudden, he's the subject of a vague, open-ended federal investigation whose goal may be to imprison him and his family. Ask anyone who's had an independent counsel on his case, and there are a lot of them here in Washington, what that's like. It's terrifying. The pressure is soul-distorting. You can wind up lashing out at the people around you, even, maybe especially, the ones trying to help you the most. So that's probably what's going on. And yet, attacking Jeff Sessions was still a useless, self-destructive act. The first rule in politics, as in war, as in life, don't shoot the friendlies. Sessions is the closest ally Trump has in this administration, one of the very few who even understands why the president won in the first place. Unlike most political appointees in Washington, Sessions made big sacrifices to work in this administration. A year ago, he was one of the most popular people in the state of Alabama, with a Senate seat he could have held forever. Many on his staff didn't want him to endorse Donald Trump, but he did anyway, purely because he felt it was important. Sessions was worried about what an unsecured border and mass immigration would do to America, even though the biggest effects from those wouldn't be seen until decades after he was long gone from this earth. So he jumped in and accepted Trump's offer to become attorney general. He didn't do it to get rich, and certainly not to become more popular. He instantly became less. You'll remember that many of his former colleagues in the Senate slandered him as a bigot during his confirmation hearings. As Attorney General, Sessions has been the rare person in the entire executive branch making actual progress implementing the agenda his boss ran on, because he's the rare person who believes in it. In an administration brimming with opportunists and ideological saboteurs, people who literally couldn't be less interested in what voters think, Sessions has never lost sight of the lessons of the last election. He's gone after sanctuary cities. He's enforced immigration laws. He's ended the Obama administration's attacks on local police departments and a lot more. He's likely the most effective member of the Trump cabinet. In return, the president attacked him in the failing New York Times. That's not just criticism. It's an insult. It's also a worrisome sign that the president may be forgetting who is on his side. Goldman Sachs did not elect Donald Trump. America's long-ignored middle class did. Trump voters may find his tweets about the media amusing and well-deserved, because obviously they are, but they're not the point of this exercise. The point is to shine some light on the broad middle of this country, on the millions of normal people who are hurting and who could badly use an ally in power for the first time in a long time. Now, the hope is that what happened yesterday was just a stress-related aberration, the political equivalent of yelling at your kids when you had a bad day at the office. If so, it will not be hard to fix this. Going forward, just pay a little less attention to the New York Times, pay a little more to Matt Drudge. And for God's sake, lay off Jeff Sessions. He is your friend, one of the very few you have in Washington. Brad Blakeman was an advisor on the Trump transition team, and he joins us in the studio. Brad, thanks a lot for coming on.
Pleasure.
So it's hard to understand why the president would lash. It's easy to understand the president's frustration with this independent counsel investigation, which is a real threat to him and to his presidency. It's hard to see why Jeff Sessions gets the blame, because I really think Sessions is one of the rare people who understands why Trump got elected.
There's no doubt that he is producing for the president. They're getting along in policy. They're not getting along in personality. And if we turn the clock back to the early part of June, when this recusal took place, Jeff Sessions knew that the president was disappointed, and he offered his resignation. The resignation was not accepted at the time. You would think that that would have blown over. There's nothing new that happened between June 6th and today, other than the president, again, lashes out at somebody who's delivering for him and the American people. It doesn't make sense at this time for the president to hurt somebody, and in fact, he's hurting himself, and he's hurting his own agenda by going after him.
And it's deeply unfair, but it also might be a sign of bad political judgment. And so I guess the macro question is, why would you care what the New York Times thinks of you? The New York Times hates him. Meanwhile, the Drudge Report, run by Matt Drudge, who's an aggregator, one of the biggest on the internet, is one of the reasons Trump got elected, I would argue. Was an early champion of Trump. Now, in the last couple of weeks, it seemed hostile to Trump. That would be an issue of real concern for me if I were running the Trump political operation. Losing people who supported me is a sign that things are going in the wrong direction. Do you think they know that?
I would hope they know that. And certainly the White House was not happy. This was reported in the last day of them being blindsided by this interview and then trying to do damage control. The president did a fantastic job on health care. He took the 52 senators to task and reminded them what their responsibility and promises were to the American people. That was all destroyed in a matter of hours by this interview. And by the way, you give an interview like that to the enemy, to the New York Times, who's no friend of yours, and who used the entire interview to bait you? That's what they were doing. And the president, unfortunately, took the bait. And now he's received the brunt of a terrible, terrible article. And it's now going to take some time for him to get back on track. But the president has to realize you can be frustrated, but you need to keep it within the family. Vent to your staff, but certainly don't vent to your enemies.
Well, I think within the context of an independent counsel investigation, the only people to whom you can vent are your lawyer and your spouse.
Absolutely.
They're the only people whose communications with you cannot be grabbed by the prosecutor. He must know this. I know a million people, as do you, who've been the subject of these things. They're really scary. They can send you to prison. Why has nobody told him that, or is he ignoring that?
Well, I think they are telling him that. He's got the finest lawyers. He's got a very brilliant staff. But if you don't take the advice, who can you blame? You have to blame yourself. And the president needs to be more disciplined, more controlled, because he's got an agenda that the American people are very acceptable of. They want Obamacare repealed and replaced. They want tax reform. They want immigration reform. These are the things that the president has to deliver on. Everything else is just noise. And he has the perfect out in not talking about it. There's a special counsel. There are investigations on the Hill.
That's right.
He's got the perfect excuse not to talk.
It was sinister today to see that leaked from the Mueller camp. The president says they better not be going after my personal finances. Bam! Less than 24 hours, a leak. Yes, they are.
That's right. But again, he was baited into that question by the New York Times. And quite frankly, the president is right. The special counsel serves at the pleasure of the president as well.
The president is absolutely right.
But he better have a good reason to get rid of him.
Yeah,
if it comes to
I don't
that.
think that would work.
I don't think it would work.
Brad Blakeman, thanks a lot for joining us.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. Just one day after the president warned special counsel Robert Mueller not to investigate his finances in an interview with the New York Times, Mueller reportedly is doing just that and having his deputies spread the word that he's doing just that. Bloomberg reported this morning that Mueller is not just looking at links between Russia and Trump's presidential campaign, he's also investigating Trump's personal business dealings that may involve Russia, even tangentially. Those would include the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Moscow. Meanwhile, about an hour ago, the Wall Street Journal reported that Mueller is also investigating former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort for possible money laundering. Charles Krauthammer is an author and columnist, and he joins us tonight. There's a lot here, but first to the timing of this. So the president says, I think unwisely, to the New York Times, Mueller can't go there with my personal finances, my family's business. The very next day, somebody from the Mueller camp leaks this. What do you think of that?
Look, I think the problem here at root is the whole idea of the special counsel, special prosecutor. Their mandates are essentially unlimited. Their resources are unlimited, and politically they're unfireable. Legally, yes, but we know what happened with Nixon when he tried to fire a special prosecutor, and I think the same would happen to Trump. He'd be engulfed if he tried to. And why does this happen? Because what it does, the reason it's wrong, is it creates an organization with unlimited resources and mandate to go on a fishing expedition. We know what happened with Clinton. It started out as a bad real estate deal and ended up with sex in the Oval Office. Not exactly two related topics.
No, it's not a linear progression.
No, it was a rather zigzag progression from one to the other. Look, I think if the mandate, let's assume, it's a given that we're having a special prosecutor, okay? He's there. The mandate is to look for the collusion, any cooperation. I think it is reasonable within the scope of that charge to look to follow the money, to see if there were financial dealings with Russia that might account for some of the collusion if they find collusion. What Trump seemed to say in the interview is he kind of accepted the logic of that. He wouldn't protest that. He seemed to say if you go beyond Russia transactions, then you're on a fishing expedition, then you cross the red line. So even Trump seems to be saying that as long as these are Russian transactions, which I assume are fairly limited, Trump himself mentioned the sale of condos, for example, to Russian nationals, which on its face completely innocent. So that seems to be where the dividing line is. I
think that's a big line, though. I mean, I'm confident until it's shown otherwise that Russia did not get Donald Trump elected. I don't think there's evidence of that. Right. Anytime you have any kind of financial transaction in Russia, whether it's buying dinner or selling a condo or having a Miss Universe pageant, I mean, who knows what's there? It's Russia.
And that's why I think looking at the finances is important. It's not a market economy like ours.
Exactly.
It's not one where you have public companies that have to make declarations on the stock market. This is a mafia regime run by thugs, ex-KGB thugs. And they launder money, they do deals, they steal. It's not to say that Trump had anything at all to do with any of that, but because those are the circumstances under which business is transacting in Russia, then you can link it logically. So again, if you accept the premise that we should have a special prosecutor, and you accept the scope to go after possible collusion, it makes sense to go after the financial dealings. But you shouldn't be in a fishing expedition to go after stuff he did with other countries, other places.
It sounds like that's where we are, and I think it could be really problematic, but why not? Charles, thank you for that.
My pleasure.
A satanic temple is trying to erect a shrine to the Prince of Darkness in a small Minnesota town. Welcome to 2017. What's the point of all this? We'll talk to the co-founder of the Satanic Temple in just a minute. He might explain.